Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today titled How to Win Local Support for Renewable Energy. My name is Ethan Loomis. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Sales for SER, and we have a full presenter panel here today. All folks from SER. We've got many teams represented here on the panel. And we are going to take you through a live demo of our services for a fake project that we have created. And so stay tuned for the next hour. We're going to move through every stage of our process very quickly. And then we'll take questions at the end. So you'll notice that the Q&A feature is enabled. Feel free to drop your questions down there as we go along in our presentation, but we will respond to those at the end. We're also recording this session, so we'll be sending that out to all attendees once that's available. And so you can always rewatch portions of this presentation at a later time. So we will get started here. Thank you all for attending. Um, just a quick outline of today's presentation. We have certainly grown since I started 6 years ago at SER, and we've added many team members, built out many different departments. So we have most of our teams represented here, walking through each stage of doing an analysis. So just what's to come over the next hour or so. This is what we'll be covering in terms of our process. And then you'll notice we've got a team photo here from the ACP Siting and Permitting Conference. We had a good chunk of our employees there at the event. Just a little bit about SER. We provide economic consulting services to developers of primarily utility scale renewable energy projects across the US. We did get our start here in the state of Illinois, where I'm based and where many of our employees are based. We started as a Midwest firm, but now we've really expanded to a national focus, doing economic impact analyses for projects across various states, and we can do an analysis for any state of the US. We do have many experts that travel across the US to provide expertise on the economic impacts of these projects. We were started in 2013 by Dr. David Loomis, Professor Emeritus of Economics at Illinois State University, and now we've grown to a company of over 25 employees performing economic impact analysis for over 700 projects in 40 different states. Here is a map of the different RTOs, ISOs throughout the United States, and just our experience with how many projects we've worked on in each territory. And again, if there's a state that we haven't looked at previously, we are happy to do an analysis for a project in a state we haven't covered. It's really just adding a week or so onto our project timeline. And we have worked with many developers over the years, 8 out of the top 10 developers of renewable energy projects in the US. So here's our fake project that we've invented that we're calling the Sunshine Solar and BESS project. Fictional project in a fictional county, Hill Valley County, Colorado. It's 1 gigawatt of solar capacity and 1 gigawatt battery energy storage. It spans 7,500 acres, and we are going to live demo our services showing what it would look like for our team to analyze this project. So if a developer first reaches out to SER, they're going to first interact with our sales team. And so our role is really just to gather some preliminary information in order to provide a scope of work and a proposal and a timeline and some pricing. So you'll notice I've included our sales checklist here on the right-hand side. We need to understand the project name, megawatt capacity, what technologies are involved. Is it just solar? Is battery storage involved? Where is it at? Does it span multiple counties? Is it a state that we haven't looked at before? And so is there going to be some additional research required on the tax side of things? And then does the developer, how far along are they in the project development timeline? Are they very early stage where they don't have any cost numbers and they may not even know exactly where their project footprint is? We can do an analysis at a very early stage um, to show orders of magnitude of economic impact. Versus a more detailed study, which is our more common scope of work, where the developer has a very defined footprint. They've got some cost estimates and some data that we can use for our analysis. If it is a solar project, are they interested in a land use analysis where we look at what's the best economic use of the land? And typically, this comes in handy in the Midwest where you're taking a large percentage or a large amount of acreage of farmland out of production. And so, how do we speak to, local folks about that issue? We can do an analysis and a separate report examining that. So that's the sales team, and typically we are the first people to interact with a developer when they come to us for a study. Um, Walking through the Sunshine Solar and BESS project. So they reach out to sales, sales gets them a proposal. We button up all of the contracts that are needed, make sure we're all good on scope of work and the agreement is signed. And then we move into the inputs received stage. So this is going to take some close coordination with our project management team. Unfortunately, our project manager was not able to join us for our webinar this morning, so I'm going to be covering Ashley, her portion. So with the inputs that we need a cost input sheet, and so we will provide a template of what we call our cost input sheet to be completed by the developer. If there are project costs that we're asking for that the developer is not able to provide, we can do some estimation of that on our side, but we prefer to get those project specific details where they're available. And then the other input that we need is either KMZ or a list of the parcels that are involved in the project. Project management will coordinate on those inputs, and then once we get those inputs, then we will build out the timeline for report completion. Typically, it takes us about 4 weeks to put together a report, but again, it varies depending on the state and how many technologies are involved and some other factors. So, project management will keep the developer updated on here's when to expect a report. Um, Project management is really the coordination between teams internally at SER and then also the single point of contact as we work through our analysis between the developer and SER. And so next, we're going to be moving through this project. We get the inputs, the timeline is built out, and finally the analysis can begin. So we will get started. And I will kick it over to Brian. The first step of our process is going to be with the tax team.
Sure. So, as Ethan mentioned, if we haven't looked at a state in particular, we will research it, find all of the relevant property tax code assumptions to use to calculate the taxes for the project. We run the analysis using those project-specific variables that we've gotten from the developer that we're working with. So we're looking at your project in particular, using its cost and size and other assumptions that are relevant for the taxes. Um, Really, what we're doing is trying to communicate to those local jurisdictions what they can expect to receive in tax. So it's a public-facing report that's a tax analysis. And so we're making slightly different assumptions than you might otherwise. And then there can be a lot of variability state by state. particularly when it comes to tax revenue, because different states have different abatements and assumptions available, different ways they calculate their property taxes. So I'll share a little bit of what we did for this particular project, the Sunshine Solar Project. So Colorado is actually a wonderful state, the only state that I'm aware of that actually provides a spreadsheet for anybody to use to calculate what the taxes from a renewable energy project would be. However, it's not quite specific enough for what we're doing, particularly if there's battery storage involved, or if you want to study a different time period than just 30 years by default. Or perhaps most importantly for what we're doing, if you want to know how much each different jurisdiction is going to receive. So if you want to know how much does the school district get, how much does the county get, et cetera, et cetera, it's really important in our reports. Individual jurisdictions will want to know what they in particular will stand to gain. And so using this instead of the Colorado default template, um, allows us to do that, but we follow their basic logic for the most part. We've made some assumptions that are slightly different in coordination with their division of property taxation to make it a little bit more exact on the property tax side of things. Colorado is a replacement tax, so you can see we've got the nameplate capacity. They have a capital cost threshold based on the nameplate capacity that sets basically the cost based on the size of the project rather than by the capital expenditure costs at the outset of the project. So it's the cost is determined by formula and then sort of levelized and adjusted based on the expected income of the project. All of that is sort of taken care of here by our template. And you can see then we have the assessed value that's multiplied by the tax rates to get to the taxes for that entity, and they're all summed up to the total taxes here. And we've sort of taken all of the things into account that need to be taken into account. These exact results go into our report, and then they are also used as an input into the next stage of things here, which I believe that Ethan will get into right now.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So that's our tax analysis. As Brian said, the taxes are an input into the broader economic impact model. And so we do our economic impact modeling in InPlan. So that takes us to the next stage of the process. I will kick it over to Chris.
Thanks, Ethan. Hello, everyone. Yes, SER utilizes InPlan, which is an economic impact modeling software service used by economists and economic development firms across the United States for many, many years. InPlan also features heavily within the JEDI model of the created by the laboratory formerly known as the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. SER used JEDI for a very long time, but we've moved to modeling exclusively within InPlan to create a more dynamic modeling process. So an IO model or an input-output model that InPlan provides is essentially saying that the outputs of one industry or one entity within the economy can be used as the inputs for another. And this process of inputs and outputs throughout the economy can be measured and quantified and used to predict or estimate new economic impacts as a result of new spending. Whenever SER does a new project or new analysis, we use economic data specific to the project county and the project state so that we are making a report that's as precise and specific to the location that we're going to be studying and that is as relevant to the potential audience of these reports. So now I'll talk a little bit more about the actual terms within our reports. And so when SER does a economic impact analysis, we're really trying to capture the ripple effects. That is the key phrase of our results section. We want to know what are the ripple effects that reverberate throughout a given economy as a result of some new spending event. In the case of this project, the project's construction period as well as the operations period. So that first ripple effect or the first impact level is what economists refer to as the direct impacts. These are the essentially the on-site personnel, or think construction workers that are building the solar and BESS plant. So you got your electricians, your carpenters, your pile drivers, operating engineers, and the like that are actually on site building the project. And these workers earn a certain amount of income that we capture at the earnings level, and they produce a certain amount of economic output, which is akin to GDP. So all of these direct impacts then create the second ripple effect that we measure called the indirect impacts. These are essentially the supply chain impacts. So the workers constructing, workers operating the solar and BESS plant, they will need purchases of fasteners, nuts and bolts. They'll need purchases of spare parts or repair services. There are site prep services and road repair services needed. There are other soft services such as lawyers, payroll, bookkeeping, etc. So there's all of this spending that's happening to support the project at the construction and annual operations period, and we capture all of that spending in the economic activity at that indirect level of ripple effects, or that indirect level of economic impacts. The final ripple effect that we measure is called the induced level of impacts. So all of those workers that are categorized at the direct level and the indirect level, they spend portions of their wages and salary within the local economy at places such as grocery stores, restaurants, bars, retail, entertainment, medical offices, housing, hospitals, and the like. So all of these local establishments that are within the economy that are very tangible to the people reading these reports, they can actually see increases in economic activity and those jobs supported at those various businesses. And so all of that economic activity at these local establishments, we try to capture at that induced level of impacts. So we have these three level of ripple effects that we measure within our report. The sum of all of their jobs, the sum of all of their earnings, the sum of all of their output is what we call the total economic impact effect. And we show this for the construction period as well as the annual operations period. And so there's a lot of segmentation and distinction between these, but another way to present it is the actual results that we show in our report. So these are the fictionalized results for the project. And you can see on the left-hand side, we have the county construction economic impacts as well as the county annual operations economic impacts. And on the right-hand side, we have the state level impacts for those two different time periods. Each rows of the four tables show the three levels of direct, indirect, and induced, with the final row being the total. So you can see the total jobs impact for the county is the sum of the three rows above that total row. And we do that for the county construction, state construction, county operations, and state operations. And so this really shows that segmentation and how it all comes together very clearly. These are essentially 48 data points that you can show to your prospective audience, to the local decision makers, the general public, to show what is your economic impact at the different levels of the economy and what that sum total is. And the essential main takeaway is that projects like this and others that we've done in the past, they have a lot of impact, not just at that direct level, but that permeate throughout the local economy, and which shows that folks, this is going to affect more lives than what they seemingly think, maybe just the landowners, the construction workers, but there's a lot of other livelihoods that can be supported as a result of this project. And so that's what we aim to show with our reports, and it can be a valuable tool when trying to do permitting, when trying to do community engagement. And with that, I will turn it back over to Ethan.
Great. One thing I do want to call out, Chris, is that on the operations side, you can see that the indirect and induced impacts are greater than the direct impacts, which we see quite often, just that ripple effect. And so if developers are only highlighting those direct jobs, that direct employment, then they're kind of selling their project short in a way of not capturing all of the impacts that the project may have. Um, Great. Well, thank you, Chris. That moves us to the next stage of our project timeline for Sunshine Solar and BESS. So the tax analysis then fed into our broader in-plan model, and Chris showed us the results of the study. Meanwhile, as Brian and Chris were working on their respective portions of the analysis, we've also been hard at work on some other sections and research of the analysis, including the tech and state section of the report, the county economics, and then some of our sources and references. So I'm going to kick it over to Sawyer Keithley, who's going to talk about that a bit more.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to take the next few minutes to walk everyone through what we mean by front matter. So, the front matter sections of our report are designed to set the stage for the economic impact and tax analyses that follow. So, it's essentially the goal is to provide a background for your audience to understand the technology and the area. While a lot of your audience will be from the local area, this shows that you've done your due diligence and you know everything that they find important about the area, or at least a fraction of it. I'm sure there are a lot of diverse interests. But initially, we start with the tech in state. That's what we call it within SER. But essentially, it's to provide a quick and accessible background on the renewable energy technology or whatever project technology we're analyzing. And importantly, how it fits into that national landscape. And we also look into the specific state where the project will be located. So this highlights things like national trends in the technology, some operational projects in the state, and current energy technology mixes used in the state. The goal of the tech and state section is to ground the reader in the broader context before we zoom in on the project itself with that economic impact and tax analysis. Then we also have an economic benefits literature review, where we focus on economic benefits that others have found before us to sort of provide a credible and up-to-date research that backs up our own. Then we look into findings on job creation, tax revenues, labor income, and other measurable impacts that we look into specifically for the project later on. The goal is to provide context of similar projects in affected and how they affected the local and regional economies. Then we also look into what we call county economics. The focus is zoomed in closer and closer as we go on. And at this point, we're looking at the county level statistics. So we present data from 2010 to the latest year available on things like employment, unemployment, population, median household income, and real GDP. All things that are relevant to shaping the county's current economic trajectory and help illustrate the local conditions where the project would be placed. This part is essential for understanding what the county is going through right now, whether it's growing, stabilizing, or even facing economic challenges like recent dips in GDP. All of this can shape how a new project might interact with the local economy, especially when we're bringing it into those economic impacts that directly provide those numbers of estimates how the GDP will be increasing. So overall, the front matter sections provide the foundation of the technology context and evidence of what other people have found, as well as the local economic picture. And so the groundwork can provide the rest of the report the ability to focus on the project itself and not questions about the technology. And with that, I will hand it back to Ethan.
Great. Thank you, Sawyer. So now that we've got the results of our study, this developer has also commissioned a land use analysis. I mentioned this at the beginning of the presentation. So our economic impact study really shows the growth of job creation and earnings and economic output due to the solar project coming in. But sometimes the community will ask, well, this land was previously used for farming or timber or some other operation or use. What's going to happen to, those workers who were using the land for another purpose. And so we can use the land use analysis to provide some data points just to walk folks through what that might mean for the local project area. So Brian, I'm going to bring you back in to talk through our land use analysis.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do a number of things in our land use analysis. Really, the goal is to look at, from a financial perspective, what impact is the project going to be having based on the change in use. So, what changes as a result of taking agricultural or timber or grazing land out of production, and then what happens as a result of putting solar on. So we look at it from the landowner's perspective, we look at it from the community's perspective, we look at it from the county's perspective. We try to consider all of the viewpoints in a lot of the things that we're doing. It's something that we've spent a lot of time on and sort of expanded this in the past couple of years in terms of what we're looking at. So we look at a number of things, particularly that we were hearing in permitting hearings that landowners had concern about, prime farmland being taken out of production, um, the loss of agricultural land leading to less food production for the world, which can be countered by talking about how yields for each crop have increased over time, leading to you being able to get more crop out of less land. We're comparing those landowner profits, looking at the end uses for common crops, showing that corn and soybeans in particular, those yield increases have led to more crop production, and the increase has largely gone towards biofuels. So that sort of thing is what we're covering here in the land use analysis. I'm going to share a couple of the graphs that we found for this particular project. Don't have time to go through the whole analysis, but one of the key things we do in the land use analysis is look specifically at the project area. So we'll get a shapefile of the project area, and we can basically look at the satellite imagery for that land and see what crops have been grown on it in the past 5 years. So you can see here for what we've done here, this is an agricultural use, primarily soybeans and corn, a little bit of non-agricultural use as well. But we take that and use those specific crops that have been grown on this land to run our modeling and to base the rest of the analysis off of. One thing that is highly requested and that often comes up in permitting hearings as well, if you say you're going to create jobs, have you taken into account the jobs that are going to be lost as a result of removing agricultural production? So we will run an economic impact analysis of continued agricultural production using the crops that are currently being grown and compare that to the solar use of the land. And so you can see here solar comes out quite favorable for both the construction and operations period. And then we do take a look at the net impacts over time as well for those economic impacts. We also take a look at the agricultural trends. So you can see in this county in particular, those yields have been increasing for these two crops. Means you can take, essentially the land for this project out of production. The rest of the county will make up for that lost acreage with better production from the rest of its acreage within a year in most cases. So we feel it's a really strong argument that the land isn't is can be converted to solar because the agricultural production can be made up for in the county with the rest of the land. Then we take a look at the profits that can be expected based on the economics of agriculture. We run a bunch of simulations and compare those to the solar lease and see which is better for the landowner. If it's better for the landowner to continue farming or to lease to solar. And in almost all cases, it's better for the landowner to lease to solar. They're getting a better deal on that than farming the land. So those are the basics of what we look at in some of the graphs in our land use analysis.
Great. Thank you, Brian. All right. So now we have completed our land use analysis for the Sunshine Solar and BESS project. Now that all of our data collection and analysis is done, we move into the report assembly where we are going to start writing about the findings of our analysis. And so I will pass it over to Mandy, who oversees our report writing and proofreading team.
So our team is, our goal of our team is to clearly and effectively communicate the results that our other teams have been collecting to the clients and to the communities where they hope to build their projects. We want to ensure that the quality academic work that we're doing is accessible to a broad audience. So we're looking at the results, the graphs, the tables, and the narrative to make sure that they are telling a cohesive story. We copy the results into the reports. We update the language throughout the reports. We check the grammar and the spelling. We make sure all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. We have stylistic rules and report standards we follow to ensure that we have consistency among all of our reports. We also have different types of technology in our reports. So this one is solar, but we do wind, battery, we do transmission. We've done a variety of other technologies as well. So we have to make sure that the language that we put in each of our reports is explaining the technology accurately throughout. We also have different types of reports. We have handouts, which is usually a 2-page report that summarizes the results in a concise way. And we have a full report, which is anywhere from 30 to 50 pages that in more detail explains the process behind the results as well as the results themselves and explains them in more detail. We have land use reports, as Brian just explained. So those are, I think, around 20-page reports. So we're looking at the language in those reports as well to make sure it's consistent. And we also have videos. So we want to make sure that the video is representing the results that are in the reports. And so we're proofreading those as well. We have several stages of proofreading along the way, and we have multiple sets of eyes that are looking at the reports to make sure that one person didn't overlook something. And so our goal is to ensure the accuracy across all the reports. Our team is great at attention to detail, and we really enjoy helping the reports to shine. We like being the gatekeepers of the company to make sure that that we are catching anything, any kind of even small mistake before it goes out the door. And we really like doing what we do. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mandy. So now that we've got our report written, we are going to move into the layout and making it essentially look nice. So we're going to kick it over to Paige, who's going to talk about our graphic design process.
Thanks, Ethan. Yeah, so, once it gets to graphic design, basically the data has been gathered, the report's been written, and it's really up to us to tell the economic story visually. And at that stage, the goal is to bring clarity to the report, really. And good design often helps translate, all the complex economic insights into something that's really engaging and easy for the audience to understand. There's a few key ways that we do this. First of all, we use white space in photos. We intentionally use white space in photography to give the content some room to breathe. White space isn't empty, which sometimes people often think, oh, there's nothing there, but it usually helps guide the reader's eye and keep the report from feeling too overwhelming. Strategic photo placement can also reinforce the story and kind of adds more of a human element to what otherwise can feel very data heavy. Second, we have a clean and presentable look. So our goal is a design that feels professional, consistent, and very easy to navigate for the reader. So that means just aligning with our brand standards, using consistent typography and color, and making sure that each page feels really cohesive. A clean layout builds trust with the reader and just reflects the quality of the analysis that we want to communicate. Third, we use visuals paired with text. So we don't just present the data, we translate it, pairing charts, icons, call outs, whatever it may be, with text to help clarify key points and make complex information more digestible. This ensures that readers can quickly understand the so what behind the report and behind the data. And lastly, we really want to try to reduce the cognitive load. Every design decision is made to make the report easier to process. So we simplify layouts, break up really dense text, and highlight key takeaways so readers don't have to work so hard to find meaning. So again, the goal is to make even a technical report, which is what we do, feel very intuitive and approachable. So back to you, Ethan.
Great. Thank you, Paige. So now we've got our report fully designed, and we are ready to send that initial report over to the developer. And so I'm going to just share a little bit about what our report looks like. So now that we've got this report ready to go, this is what the developer is going to see. From our standpoint, this report is in its final graphic designed format. And so this is ready to use in presentations with the local county, with local decision makers. We've got an executive summary right off the bat with showing the jobs, earnings, economic impact, and local tax revenue, breaking out that tax revenue into how much is going to the schools, the county fund, community college, hospital, city, library, fire district. Then we include, as Sawyer talked about, the front matter sections of our reports, showing the growth of solar and battery technology in the state where this project is going to be built, showing the economic benefits of the solar industry and citing other sources. And again, the growth of energy storage in the United States and in Colorado specifically. Then we move into the specifics about the project in Hill Valley County. And then we walk through the methodology of our analysis. How do we arrive at these numbers? We used in plan, and what is direct, indirect, and induced mean, all of those details that Chris talked about. Then moving into the full detailed results section of our reports, highlighting the results in charts and graphs to show the magnitude of economic impact that this project will bring. And finally, we have a tax section breaking out that full analysis for every year of the project, how much tax revenue will be going to the county and all of those taxing entities. We do include an appendix section showing not just the number of jobs, but also the types of jobs that are created. So solar installers, electricians, construction laborers. We'll include that appendix at the end for reference if folks are interested in reading that. And then also giving just a glossary of what do we mean when we use certain terms and some definitions around those things if folks are not familiar with some of the terms that we're using if they're not in the energy industry. And then we cite all of our references here at the end and include a abbreviated CV for our report authors. So that is the economic impact analysis. And then again, the land use analysis is a separate report. This one ended up being 38 pages, so it is quite a robust, comprehensive report as well. Again, we are showing the net economic impacts of the project in this report, and a lot of the data that Brian shared in his portion of the presentation will end up here. So now I will kick it over to Dave, who will walk through the last portion of our presentation. I'm just going to share my screen here again. One step that I didn't mention is we do allow developers to provide feedback on the report. Again, from our standpoint, report's good to go, but we understand developers may want to tweak some language or have some questions, and so it is a collaborative process, so we can make changes to the report if needed. And then the report has been now filed with the permit application for a special use permit. And now it comes time for the developer to make a case for their project and present at the permitting hearing. And so many developers will bring in SER to assist with providing testimony, talking about the economic impact study that we did. So, Dave, kick it over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Ethan. And I'm very proud of our team that we've assembled that are really looking at all the different aspects of the report and analysis of things that put together. And I'd say that a good portion of the projects that we work on just file that report to prove to local stakeholders the economic benefits that will flow to the community. But there are cases where you need expert testimony. And so that's the advantage in working with SER is we do have a team of experts. I personally have testified, I think, in over 125 different venues. So for those states that do Public Utility Commission permitting, I've testified in Wisconsin. I was at the Iowa Utilities Commission or Iowa Utilities Board before that. The Missouri Commission, Indiana Commission, now Michigan is moving towards a statewide permitting with the Public Service Commission and filing there. And so have done the commissions quite a bit, 14 different states. But we now have a team of professionals that can go out and explain the economic impacts, how we do the reports. So there's 5 professionals in addition to myself that can go give expert testimony at the township, county, or state level and support our report and really, be cross-examined, be able to answer and defend the analysis and report. And our goal is really, as was said before, to have academic quality research, but communicate that in a public-friendly way so it's very understandable and can help win approval of projects, because this is the good news of what your project is going to bring. So drilling down to those taxing jurisdictions so that each entity can see exactly how much they're going to get year by year, to say what are the jobs impacts, what are those ripple effects into the local community. And so our role is to be those experts that have looked at your project, to be able to explain those benefits on both the tax side, the economic impact side, and the land use is really a more defensive view of saying, what are the economic changes that come to a local community as a result of this transition from agricultural use to solar use. And so we've been happy to see a lot of the projects that we have helped support and testify for that have had successful outcomes in their permitting decisions. And I think it's an important component to be able to talk to local decision makers. I think a lot of developers will just say, well, it'll create 200 construction jobs and 4 solar technicians and leave it at that. And I think that's leaving a lot of the benefits unexplained, and a lot of the benefits, you're shortchanging your project if that's where you leave things. And so we can help demonstrate to those local stakeholders that the benefits are much, much more. So with that, I'll turn it back to Ethan.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So we are going to move into our Q&A portion. We've gotten some great questions. So I'm going to bring our presenters back in and try and tackle these by topic, kind of group the questions by topic. I see we have 7 questions so far. Feel free to drop in more. First questions have to do with our economic impact analysis. And so, Chris, I'm going to have you tackle these, but Dave, Brian, others, if you have Sawyer, if you have um, other items to note, please feel free to jump in as well. One attendee asks, how are you managing NIMBY accusations that the indirect and induced jobs never materialize? What retroactive auditing of fidelity to predictive assessments exist?
Yeah, sure. That's a question we get oftentimes. It can be a little nebulous to understand these indirect and induced job creation as a result. It can be a little more wonky in terms of economics. But these jobs are created as a result of spending within the community for the supply chain necessary goods and services. And so if there is spending within the area, we're able to capture that within our modeling process and then feed that into the model and then show that there are certain livelihoods, full-time jobs, portions of jobs that are supported as a result of this spending. Now, this depends on the developer as well as the EPC actually spending that money within the local community. We do that kind of due diligence ahead of time where we look at the economic industries within the project county or the project state and see, what is actually relevant there. Do they have, the necessary construction labor to help out? Do they have, concrete or cement manufacturing for like a wind farm and such? Is there wholesalers or manufacturers of certain nuts and bolts, fasteners, all those kind of minor equipment purchases? Does the county have that? And oftentimes, we're dealing with these large energy projects in rural counties, so their industries are pretty small. So we don't assume a lot of spending within there. We assume very minor amounts, and it's all proportional and relevant to that specific county and the county region. In terms of validating the results afterward, many years ago, Dr. David Loomis was able to validate his results to about 1 to 5% for a particular wind farm we analyzed. Unfortunately, we don't get to do that kind of ex post analysis very often. Requires a significant amount of legwork for the developer and EPCs, contractors, subcontractors, supply chain companies. And so, if I had it my way, we would do it for every single project, but we don't get that opportunity very often. So if there's somebody that has that opportunity for us, I'd love to tackle it. But unfortunately, it's more of an administrative burden. But we've done it in the past for one particular project, so that gives us confidence going forward. And when we do our analysis, we're always striving to be conservative with our estimations. We don't want to overpromise anything. These are projects worth hundreds of millions of dollars, worth billions of dollars. They're going to be creating economic impacts. We don't need to artificially juice the numbers to make them look any better. We are going to make a defensive, conservative, reasonable analysis that the people in the community who are reading these reports are going to feel satisfied with, and they're not going to be questioning or accusing us of malpractice in some way.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, Chris. And I will also mention that in InPlan, we're using historical data. So that InPlan multiplier data shows historically for every dollar that's spent in a certain sector of the economy, what are the ripple effects historically? So we can rest assured that when we're putting numbers into InPlan through that analysis, it's based on that historic multiplier effect. And we have seen in more rural counties for some projects, we'll get grilled on, well, there's not going to be any really induced impacts because we don't really even have a gas station or a grocery store, and we'll see that reflected in the data. If there's very little local business to be supported by a project, then we're gonna see that in the numbers. Anything else to mention on those points? All right. We've got some questions about land use analysis. So let's jump over to that. The first question here is, what variables go into a land use analysis?
Sure. So primarily we're looking at that project footprint. We really want to look at the inside the fence footprint. So just the land that we'd expect to get taken out of production. We use the economic impact analysis as an input as well. See the number of jobs expected from the solar project, looking specifically at the land and the crops that are being grown on that particular footprint. Those are the most important inputs. We use a lot of data from the USDA. They have some great census and survey data around income from farms, prices, yields, all sorts of stuff on a state and county level. So they're a great resource for a lot of that information that we're going to need. Also, we'd mentioned we can support timber and grazing analyses. We have a different set of sources for those, particularly on the timber side. But we do have good sources and look at slightly different information for those types of uses. But I'd say come to similar results on the net economic impacts. We're generally seeing a really strong case for solar, and same for the landowner profits side of things for all three types of use.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Another land use question. It says, what about information you share as it relates to the productivity level of the land after the project is decommissioned? This person gets a lot of questions about how productive the land will be after a developer returns the land back to its original use.
Yeah, so that really depends on the type of use. If you're talking about timber, it's going to be hard to return that to timber use after the solar project is placed into service. Timber takes a long time to grow. It can be done, but it's going to be, years and years. For agriculture and grazing, it's pretty immediate. We have some good studies that show that letting the land lie fallow is good for the land. It can return the soil to, a more healthy state than being farmed every single year or grazed every single year. And so we've got that research included it in our land use analysis. And there's one other thing I wanted to say about that. Oh yeah, there are also programs where you can, take the land out of commission for a period of time, and just, let it be restored to its health. And so those sorts of things exist, and I think there's good data to support that letting the land lie fallow is a positive for the soil health. These are temporary installations that don't harm the land itself and can be removed as a part of decommissioning, and it can go back to its original use.
Great. And one last land use question. Someone asks, do you run Monte Carlo simulations for land use analysis?
We do run Monte Carlo simulations for land use analysis, so that's an easy one. Yes. On the landowner profits side of things. Yeah, that's where we're modeling that.
All right, next question here is, do we find people responding negatively to jobs in the county? Does this point go against their desire to keep things the same? We have seen solar and BESS projects be positioned as not stressing local resources, and it is not clear if this works or not.
Yeah, we've also seen this. It can be a little funny where some people are criticizing these energy projects for not producing enough jobs, and now some people don't want them there because it just changes everything, and there's going to be people moving in. So now there's too many jobs. So which one is it? And I think this is something we implicitly address we can explicitly talk about this during testimony, but within the report, when we show those direct operational jobs, they are proportional to the size of the project. And solar projects, wind projects of a certain size, they don't create too many on-site jobs. So there's it, already not too many people coming into the area. And so a reader from the local community will see this and look at that jobs number, and based on their perspective, they will make the determination that, oh, this isn't that many people moving in, therefore um, our local area isn't going to be changed by newcomers as much as, say, a corporate headquarters or a new manufacturing facility, a new subdivision. One of the points we make in our property tax section is that there isn't as much stress for local government service providers like school districts, fire districts, et cetera, as a result of a new subdivision coming in or a new massive amount of workers influx coming into the community than there is for these wind and solar, battery, et cetera, projects. So that argument is really made implicitly dependent on the reader seeing this and saying, that's not that many jobs. What is, really impactful for them is that the people who are already there, the established community members, are going to be seeing an increase or large gains in the property tax revenue, so that these local government service providers now actually have more money to be spending on these established community members and giving them more services, upgrading necessary equipment, increasing payroll, et cetera, at the county level, school level, fire department, parks department, things like that. So there is this argument that we implicitly make that there isn't going to be a huge population change as a result of these projects, and that the people there are going to be experiencing benefits as a result of the increased property tax revenue, which affects almost everybody in the community.
Great. Thanks, Chris. All right, well, our last question here is just, can you share a sample report? And I will gladly answer that and share my screen here. If you go to our website here, strategiceconomic.com, and click on the library page of our website, we've done over 700 of these reports from a marketing standpoint. I would love to be able to share all 700, but we do sign NDAs with all of our clients. And so the ones that are available kind of on a public website that we have found, sometimes they're uploaded by the developer themselves or the county will upload them. Those are available here to view. So you can see some examples of our past work on the solar side. You can see a sample land use analysis. Here's some wind reports, and then we've done some work on transmission and then battery storage. So feel free to check out those reports on our website here. And we could also make we haven't talked about this, but we could make the sample report available for our Sunshine Solar and BESS project. So we'll send that out with the recording so you all can see the analysis that we produced for this fictional project. And that is really going to show you the latest and greatest from a design standpoint. We did a new design look and feel of the report a couple months ago and rolled that out. And so that's how all of our reports will look moving forward. And so we'll make that available to all attendees. Thank you all for joining, and thanks to our presenters here at SER. If you have questions about our analysis, or you're interested in SER doing an analysis for your specific project, please reach out to me. My email is ethan@strategiceconomic.com, or you can go to our website, fill out the contact form. Would love to talk with you more about what that could look like for your project. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your Tuesday.